Hi, I'm Henry Latham, founder and lead mentor at the Prod MBA, a 6-week training program designed to fast-track product managers and product owners to become head of product. So this week I'm talking with Antonia Landi, who is product manager at Living Packets, who has a background really focusing on implementing agile process and leading various product teams in the Berlin startup scene. Hi, Antonia.
Hello.
How's it going?
Excellent.
Yeah, so last time we spoke, you mentioned, when we were speaking over LinkedIn about this, you mentioned a common topic that comes up when you speak at conferences or attend meetups, and that is how to break into product management.
Yeah.
So talk me through how you got into product management.
So actually, I don't think I realized I wanted to be in product management until a couple of years ago. So I actually studied English literature and journalism.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about going into tech. And then I had a job come up in Edinburgh at Rockstar as a games tester. And I was like, okay, sounds fun.
That sounds quite fun, yeah.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, it's actually quite intense. But yeah, so I joined Rockstar. I was like, oh, cool, I'm actually quite good at this. So I pursued. Yes,
talk me
please.
through what that's like. Because I think so. One thing I think it's really important, like some of these really granular details. You know, these small things you picked up like 5 years ago that don't seem relevant. Talk me through what were the kinds of things you do as a games tester.
So I was on the online multiplayer team, and that. So I really think that being in that team helped me on my path to becoming a product manager, because it was a lot of the tests were large scale tests. It was get 20 odd people into the same session and get them to do the same thing. Like, let's all meet at this and this square, and then just like randomly start shooting each other and see what happens. But really, there was a lot of coordination. At the time, we were also working with our sister studio in Lincoln. So there was coordination that was like, you couldn't do this in-house. There was a lot of that. There was a lot. I mean, GTA is a massive, massive game. And there was so many bugs, and you really needed to groom these things and understand, well, what's the most important thing for me to test right now. And honestly, that's where I learned how to prioritize, and that's where I learned how to coordinate teams.
That's really interesting. Did you have any, like back then, any framework for prioritization, or was it more, you know, what something obvious to you that, you know, you can't, I don't know, drive a car, or the guy can't move forward or whatever?
Yeah, so I mean, we were always given guidelines. So things that are game breaking, like I mean, obviously like a crash is very high priority. And then you get into the more nitty gritty stuff. So for example, are you able to complete a race? Yes. Are you able, like, I'm able to complete it, but such and such and such. So that's already a lower priority than I can't complete it at all and I'm stuck. I can't get any further.
Okay, so sort of doing QA essentially with quite specific sort of, what do you call it, criteria.
Yes, exactly.
That's really interesting. Sorry, I interrupted on a tangent.
Not at all.
So talk me through then the next step from Rockstar.
Eventually moved to Berlin. Again, you know, I had experience in QA, so I thought, well, let's try doing this for software, for something that isn't games. And that's really how I started here in Berlin, doing software QA. And that's when I started getting closer to product teams or product managers and thinking, so I think my approach to QA was always more user focused than it was tech focused. I mean, I don't have a tech background. I never broke into test automation, for example. So my strength was really into thinking, how does this feel for the user?
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually already quite a big part of product management. I was a bit further on in the discovery process. So, features were already implemented, but one of my strengths that I perceived when I was in QA was really thinking, well, how does this feel? Like, okay, it works, but it feels shit. And if you have an app, for example, that is functionally fine, but doesn't feel good to use, doesn't feel delightful, then users aren't going to use it. It doesn't matter that it doesn't crash.
Yeah. That touches upon a really interesting topic with product management specifically, right? The product manager role versus, let's say, like product owner within a Scrum team, which is very much about that. People use the word empathy a lot, but I think ultimately it's like empathy when it is thinking deeply about the user experience in that way is incredibly valuable. And coming back to really what products are is ultimately, great products do very simple things. Like Uber originally was just click a button and a taxi arrives.
Right.
So if you're good at that and good at really cutting to actually the core of the problem rather than thinking too much on the technical side or trying to overcomplicate things, then ultimately you have the core skill set to be a good product manager.
Yeah, exactly.
And as well. So it's sort of simple. For me, it sort of comes down to, I think when I talk to people about getting into product management, it is ultimately around like logic and problem solving and empathy and leadership without the title, right? Empathizing with your team, empathizing with the customer.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I feel like I was actually quite privileged because quite early on when I moved to Berlin, I joined a really small startup. It was really just a handful of people, and we didn't really have a product person. But part of what one of my tasks was to every week, so let's say at the start of the week, every week, I would shut myself into a room. I would try as much as possible to take myself out of the day-to-day and start using the app. And just pretend to be a user, like, oh, I've just discovered this on the App Store. Let me sign up. It's like, oh, this is interesting. And I would make notes while doing that. And I still really like doing that on a regular basis, to try and take yourself out of it and really try to look at the app from a user's point of view. And then you discover so many things. That's like, oh, that's confusing. I would have assumed I could log in here, or, stuff like that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I mean, that for me, that clearly comes from a QA background, right?
It does.
Quite meticulous.
Yeah.
Because I think, coming from my background, it's very much, wearing different hats, right? If you're founding a company, it's like you're doing product mainly, but also you're rushing around trying to cover,
of course,
design, like some business, like finance, that kind of thing. So tends to be a thing of delegation, wrongly though. I think ultimately, this is why I also disagree with the separation of product owner, product management, the product manager if possible, because ultimately, like, everybody in the product needs to have a very close relationship with the product. You shouldn't be working on something if you really don't care about it. Obviously, it's hard in some cases, but you should have some sort of connection with that. Otherwise, you fail to stop and think about those little subtle things which are really important.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interactions, that slight delay on a button, etc.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, I mean, it seems to me that your path is similar to many people I see going into product management, where it is, you sort of stumble into this space and find yourself doing product management without the title.
Right.
A lot of people I speak to, having a few sales calls this week, a lot of people are in that boat that are applying for the next cohort of the product MBA. They found themselves in the position and just looking for a bit more guidance, I suppose. What do you feel then was the sort of big break for you there? Was it that sort of stumbling into that open space that was, looking to be filled?
So I think quite early on, I really loved giving suggestions, saying, oh, what if we do this? Like, and again, this started from when I was doing QA for Berlin startups, and more people would actually solicit my advice
Mm-hmm.
and say like, you have a look over this, how does this feel to you, etc. And I would sort of have this reputation of, let Antonia have a look at it and see if it makes sense from a user perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I started to realize that I could do this as a job.
Yeah.
Like, this wouldn't be my side thing. This would be my main job. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of companies that misinterpret the job of product management, and where that isn't the case. But as much as possible, I realized that that's what I actually wanted to do. Yeah.
And I think that there's two things there. So I think one, let's talk about that sort of imposter syndrome thing later, because I think
sure,
it's a big topic. But I think that is also a really important point coming back to how people get into product management. Ultimately, like, nobody has some grand plan when they start out. Like, it's very
right.
It's maybe if you're doing like law, you become a lawyer. Maybe if you're doing MBA, you go into business, right?
Yeah.
I think most people do exactly as you do. They go, well, I'm quite good at problem solving.
Exactly.
I sort of get it. I've seemed to be a bit better than some people around me at this. So I'm just going to go into it. But I think also more important point there is what that demonstrates, again, sort of observing your path there and also seeing how you acted in the Prod MBA program. But ultimately, like, having the confidence to do that. Just stepping in and doing it. I think just realizing that you don't need, that is imposter syndrome, but you don't need, 5 degrees to do this.
Absolutely.
It's really logic.
Absolutely.
And I think also in some cases, from my experience, it is sometimes better not having a technical background. Because again, you're rather than jumping to solutions or like how we can build this feature, you're better at saying, like, why are we doing this in the first place? You staying that level higher, which
absolutely
is super important to, like, any effective product leader.
So I've known product managers that came from a development background, and it's very hard to let that go. I mean, it was also quite a jump for me, going from QA to product management, and really having to say to my QA people now, this bug isn't important. We're not going to fix this for the release, and as
panic
exactly. And it is definitely a switch, like, and some of these things really stay with you. But I think especially it's especially tough coming from development, because you are inherently driven by wanting to offer solutions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is one big frustration I have with the whole product space is, one reason, I think a key reason many people do not get into product management is they conflate it with project management. So, if I am not technical, if I don't have a Scrum certification, I've never run a sprint before, they go immediately discount themselves. And ultimately, project management is a skill within your armory. So
absolutely,
being able to run a Scrum makes sense in some context, but it's not always what you should be doing. Sometimes Kanban, just if you don't know what a Kanban is, just literally a to-do list.
Exactly.
More effective. It's like as humans always do, like overcomplicating things that don't need to be overcomplicated, which is annoying because then you actually remove out of the equation some people that are very good. Because I had this conversation with someone I mentored before. It's like they were a very good project manager, but they weren't suited to product manager, and that's not actually what they wanted to do. Like, they liked getting shit done. They like moving things from A to B,
exactly,
rather than being, dealing with these quite big questions, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing all of this?
And that's, like you say, like that's still a very valuable skill, right? Part of being a product manager is being able to get things done.
Yes.
Right. But that's something you can learn.
Exactly. And it is secondary to getting the right thing done.
Exactly.
Ultimately, there's a famous quote by Marty Kagan. It's like, if you have 100 developers, it doesn't matter if they're building the wrong thing. You have to be building something that's creating value for the customer, for the business. That's the thing that really matters. But in the world where, product equals project management, and where Scrum certifications are all over the place, seem like the sort of gold standard, it really draws away from that core, as you said, which, I can tell that you're a good product manager from observing you in the program and also your current role, right? And it's really this thing of like empathy, problem solving, prioritization, these kinds of things, which are common sense plus experience.
Exactly. And it's one of those things, I mean, even with the Scrum certification, like, why do you need to have a Scrum certification? Why do you need to do Scrum? Like, it sounds so controversial sometimes. Like, what else would we be doing?
I caught a Twitter, a Medium storm by posting basically an article on agile anti-patterns and saying like most of the time this is done really wrong. Same with the MVP, it's bastardized so much.
Absolutely.
It's better to actually just not use the words and like go, oh, let's use that thing when we see a specific problem arise. Like we're not actually done quickly. And it's exactly, it goes, I mean, there's a whole industry around it. That's the crazy.
Right.
And it's exactly why we started the Prod MBA, is to say, okay, like if you want to do project management, like there's a million things to learn that.
Yeah.
Specifically, some these soft skills of product management.
Yeah.
You need to do something else. Let's talk about. I think we touched upon a few. I can see a few threads in that story as well. Like maybe not specifically for product management, but what do you think is good advice for people trying to step up in their career in general?
So honestly, the way it has always worked for me is to do the thing before you get the promotion. So like not wait around and think, well, I'm doing a perfectly good job as an individual contributor. Why am I not getting this promotion? And it's also in my network, what I see a lot, the people that do step up are the people that go above and beyond, right? It's don't constrict yourself to your role and start thinking about what is best for the business. And that's, for me personally, has been a total game changer.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Sorry, I muted myself to quote to you on that later. The other thing before you get the promotion. Yes, I cannot agree more. And I think that's again where, this sort of, ultimately product, like whatever you're doing, you're wearing different hats. Like product management strays across a lot with UX. UX strays across with UI. UI should stray a lot into development. Development should also be wearing a product management hat as well.
Right.
So I think that is, key for an effective team, first of all, like having a good cross-functional team. But yeah, you're completely right. It's, ultimately titles are there. They're a thing. It's part of playing like the career game. But they're not what defines your skill set.
Exactly.
And that was an interesting learning for us actually with the first cohort is, you see people with 10 years experience, like product owner, but they've never done a user interview before.
Right.
Literally never spoken to a customer.
Yeah.
So what does that 10 years, what is the value of the 10 years versus, you doing a couple of months in a small startup as a product manager?
Absolutely. And actually, one of my former employers, it's told me something that still sticks with me to this day. It's like, it doesn't really matter how much experience you have. Like, you could be doing 1 year or you could be doing the same year 10 times. It doesn't automatically make you better.
Yeah. No,
and that's something. Yeah.
And I think that is, giving advice to general career advice. That's something that I hold very, very strongly, and why we pitch ourselves around ultimately like going from product manager or product owner to head of product within a couple of years, because it is possible.
Absolutely.
Because you're playing a different game. And it's exactly that. It's saying, where are the opportunities where I'm going to be compounding my learning so that within 1 year I'm learning a huge amount rather than sitting at my desk every day doing a couple of hours work, like 6 hours of Facebook.
Exactly.
You're still ticking.
Push some tickets around,
And you're fine. Like, you'll get at some point get a promotion, or you do 5 years and you're going to go to another company and they're going to go, wow, he's got 5 years and he must be really good at this.
Right.
It's fine. Like if you want to play that game, it's fine. But I think ultimately you can really accelerate you'll do it
Absolutely.
by exactly as you said, right? Really just moving and taking action rather than waiting for someone to tell you what to do. And I mean, it's interesting though, because the irony is the question itself of, I think people always ask questions that they know the answer to, right?
Right.
People go, oh, how could I level up my career? Like, I'm frustrated, but I want to take that next step. Most time they know, and they know it's about really life and trying new things, but they're trying to delegate to other people to make it happen.
Right.
And ultimately it's like, you have to do it yourself.
Right.
That would be my biggest learning, particularly working in the entrepreneurship space. It's ultimately like, nobody's coming for you. Nobody's going to save you with this stuff. Like, you
Right.
have to
Absolutely.
go and take action yourself, or it's just
Yeah.
going to happen. Anyway, that is a huge topic, but let's talk about, we touched upon it earlier. Let's talk about imposter syndrome. So I think, with the program, with the Prod MBA, one thing I noticed a lot was imposter syndrome in female students, particularly. I don't think so much in your case, but in lots of, private messages and conversation I was having. And just a bit of context for anyone listening. So with week 1 and 2, what we do is we reach out to potential customers with no idea of a solution yet. So just an offer statement, saying this is what we think the problem is, and this is how we solve it. So no actual solution, like no business, no website. And this is, intimidating, right? You're just contacting people on LinkedIn, Facebook, other channels as well. Need confidence, bit of resilience there. And yeah, I would be interested, because I think this is a very useful conversation for any female product people listening, that most of the questions I was getting was not about how to do it. It was like, I don't feel comfortable reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn without a solution. Maybe let's not talk about why this is the case, because I think that's a much larger conversation about like gender roles, I suppose. But maybe what specific advice you would give to women feeling that they aren't trained or experienced, or fill in the blanks. I think it's particularly pertinent in product, where there is no, degree to do this stuff.
I feel like I've actually felt imposter syndrome in every single role in every single company I've ever had, right? I went into tech without a technical background. I went into product without a product. I mean, what's even a product background, right? And then I started working on increasingly more and more technical subjects with people that have a much longer tenure than me, and thinking that these people rely on me to give them answers, but they are so much smarter than me. One thing, and I actually read up a lot about imposter syndrome and how to overcome it and all these things, and one thing that always stuck out to me is from some article I read a while ago, and it's just taking a moment to yourself and thinking, what would you do right now if you were 100% confident? And then trying to get yourself to the place where you're comfortable doing that.
Yeah, that is really good advice, actually. Talk me through, have you used that specifically in your current role? Because I know you're quite new to the current role.
So I think in my current role, it's really more about thinking big. I just moved from being a product owner to being a product manager. Also, I am the only product person in the team at the moment. So there's quite a lot of things on my plate. And for me at the moment, this topic, what would I do, comes into play when I think about, well, what would I do if I enlarged my scope, right? For me, imposter syndrome at the moment looks like, oh, I don't know if I have that mandate. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. And for me, that's what I'm going through at the moment.
Yeah, that's really good advice, actually. I think there's quite a few writing exercises I've done before where you try to detach yourself from yourself and
yeah,
yourself, and you're sort of doing an external analysis in a way, it's external perspective that can be very effective because it gets you out of that, internal narrative of sort of uncertainty, etc.
And it's always like every time you're so much more in your head than anybody else is. Like just speak to a colleague, speak to a friend, because the way you think you're being perceived is not the way you're being perceived.
Yeah. Any specific tactics you think for like female product managers though? Because I know, for example, men tend to interrupt more, this kind of thing. I'm guilty of it a lot, but I try to balance it across genders at least. Any specific tactics, like one or two tactics that you have used, maybe even without realizing?
Sure. So actually there's a really great TED talk on body language. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that more often than not, women take up less space, right? Mm-hmm. Because of their physique, because of their frame, but also because we're generally sitting pretty, having our hands under the table, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's really, and I still do this before a big meeting or before something that I'm nervous, like just spread out, mm-hmm. like sit back, sit confidently, take up space, have your shoulders back. And it actually makes such a difference in how you behave. Like a super life hack for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It is, again, it's these small things that are very, very interesting. I would also back that up with, I think just generally reading up a lot. Because, my background is actually UX back in the day, but it's having a good understanding of psychology clearly is useful for understanding customers, but also other people you work with.
Yeah.
And that, I think is trying to, who is the person you're speaking to? Like, what is, in particular when you're a manager, like what is their unique perspective? What are they worrying about? Where do they want to go? In their personal life, professional life, etc. And just trying to not play the person, but deal with people in a unique way so that you can essentially get them to do what you want better.
Right? Absolutely. I mean, that's before I started this job, one of my mentors recommended I read The First 90 Days. And it's all about,
this book has come up a lot.
It's very good. I highly recommend it. And it's really a lot about get to know your boss. They have desires and they answer to someone else. They have things that they need to complete and get done. And if you can become the person that gets the stuff done for them, like that's going to have a huge impact on your career and a huge impact on you working together.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I have a rule: if I hear a book twice, I have to read it. so I put it on my list now to get through it. And I think just coming back to the start as well, I think imposter syndrome is a problem in product generally.
Absolutely.
And advice is ultimately, there's a difference between getting the first job and getting good at product. And I think getting the first job comes down to, having a Scrum certification, maybe just luck, right? Falling into the right position. But I think ultimately becoming a true product leader is about this empathy for customer, empathy for your team, your boss as well. But ultimately really problem solving. I think if you frameworks are there to help you, whether you use like effort impact scale or matrix or Scrum, they're there to help you, but ultimately I think there's a point where you sort of go, I'm just confident in my vision and we will work to get there, and I want to get everyone behind me with that vision. And if you do that, then all the other stuff doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't think anybody is ever really 100% confident. Like most people are just winging it. And that's, you need to be ready and happy to make mistakes and just do the things that make you uncomfortable. And the sooner you make a mistake, the sooner you realize that it doesn't actually matter that much.
Exactly. No, I mean, great advice coming back to, again, your point about, just do the thing before you get the promotion, just try stuff. Exactly. As you said, like worst case scenario, you're not going to take the whole website offline. It's a minor, tiny thing.
Right.
Piss off one customer. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So thank you so much for the time. It was really, really nice catch up again since we saw each other at the Prod MBA meetup. So for anyone looking to sort of accelerate their product career, we still have a few places available on the next cohort of the Prod MBA. So you can go to just www.prod.mba to learn more. Antonia, if you want anybody to find you, follow you, obviously in the digital world, not in person, then where should we direct them?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter a lot, and I'm super happy for people to contact me. I love talking about product management. I love talking about career development, startups, etc. So please do reach out.
Perfect. So that's on LinkedIn, just Antonia Landi, ANTONIA LANDI. I'll post the link. Actually, no, I'll post the link on the video.
You'll be fine.
Awesome. So thanks everyone for listening, and speak to you soon.